said and done. Let's get to Cleveland. Deshaun Watson, Shedeur Sanders getting first-team reps at OTAs. What do we make of that?
Yeah, not surprised at all, right? Todd Monken came out and said this is going to be a competition. I thought it was hilarious. Earlier this week, he was complaining about interceptions on 7-on-7. And for people that don't know what 7-on-7 is, that means there's no offensive line, no defensive line. This competition will go out throughout training camp, and it'll be interesting to see who ultimately wins that starting job. If you would have told me a year ago that Deshaun Watson would still have a chance to...
The Cleveland Browns just handed their starting quarterback reps to a rookie. And Deshaun Watson, he's standing right there watching. Think about what that means for a second. A franchise that paid Deshaun Watson a fully guaranteed $230 million contract, the richest in NFL history at the time, is now splitting first-team reps with a kid they drafted in the 5th round. A kid a lot of people said shouldn't have fallen that far. A kid whose last name carries more weight than almost any name in football right now. Shedeur Sanders isn't just fighting for a starting job in Cleveland, he's fighting against a narrative that's been following him his entire career, that he only got here because of his father, that the NFL stage would expose him, that when the pressure got real, he'd fold. OTAs just started, and already, the script is being flipped.
If you had your pick, who would you pick out of the two, Deuce?
I'm going to go with the younger guy, right? It seemed like when ownership has come out, Tommy, and says, we made a mistake with the Deshaun Watson trade, you would think that they were going to push the envelope forward. So for them to revert, and yes, they do have to pay Deshaun Watson no matter what, but if the ownership comes out and said we made a mistake with that trade.
Let's go back for a moment. When Deshaun Sanders took over at Colorado, the whole country was watching. Prime time, cameras everywhere, a reality show atmosphere around a college football program. And right in the middle of it all was his son, the quarterback. Now, being a coach's son in football is complicated enough, but being Deshaun Sanders' son at a program Deshaun Sanders rebuilt overnight into a national media circus, that's something else entirely. Every completion Shedeur threw was either proof of his talent or proof of his daddy's influence. There was no middle ground. Fans either loved him or used him as a punchline. And the media? Don't even get started on the media. Skip Bayless questioned him. Colin Cowherd questioned him. Random NFL scouts went on record questioning whether his college success would translate. One anonymous GM called him a system quarterback. Another said he had accuracy concerns at the next level. Accuracy concerns for a guy who broke NCAA completion percentage records. That's the world Shedeur Sanders has been living in.
But if the ownership comes out and said we made a mistake with that trade, why not move forward with the franchise and see what you have in the younger guy? And then if you feel like the younger guy isn't it, you have a lot of draft capital next year to go get your guy in the first round. So if I were the Cleveland Browns, I would go with the younger quarterback in Shedeur Sanders, especially with the ownership coming out vocally and saying that we made a mistake by taking or trading for Deshaun Watson a few years ago.
So Todd Monken taking over for Kevin Stefanski, who's now the head man in Atlanta. How's your assessment?
The draft was supposed to be his moment. Instead, it became a story about everything except football. He fell and kept falling on draft night, while the cameras stayed fixed on the Sanders family suite, watching every reaction, every grimace, every whispered conversation. It was painful to watch, and depending on who you asked, either deeply unfair or completely deserved. Some people said teams passed on him because of football reasons, the RPO-heavy offense at Colorado, questions about reading NFL-level defenses, concerns about pocket presence against elite pass rushers. Other people, scouts, coaches, former players, said the real reason was something uglier, that teams were worried about the circus, the attention, the father, that Deshaun Sanders in the building would become a distraction no coaching staff wanted to deal with. Either way, Shedeur Sanders slid, and when Cleveland finally took him, the reaction online was loud. Some fans celebrated, some laughed. A lot of people immediately asked the same question. Is he actually good enough, or is this just another chapter in the Deshaun show?
Yeah, not surprised at all, right? Todd Monken came out and said this is going to be a competition. I thought it was hilarious. Earlier this week, he was complaining about interceptions on 7-on-7. And for people that don't know what 7-on-7 is, that means there's no offensive line, no defensive line. This competition will go out throughout training camp, and it'll be interesting to see who ultimately wins that starting job. If you would have told me a year ago that Deshaun Watson would still have a chance to start, I would say you were lying. But it seems like there's a real opportunity for Deshaun Watson to go battle it.
Here's the thing, though. Football doesn't care about narratives. The ball doesn't know whose son you are. The pocket doesn't open wider because your dad was a Hall of Famer. And a cornerback coming off the edge at full speed, he definitely doesn't care about your Instagram following. The comparison started immediately. People brought up Ryan Leaf, Jamarcus Russell, every high-profile quarterback who couldn't survive the transition from college star to NFL reality. But here's what's interesting. Nobody was really watching the same tape. Shedeur Sanders at Colorado wasn't just throwing into open windows in a spread offense. He was taking hits, real hits, behind an offensive line that gave up pressure at one of the highest rates in college football. And he kept delivering. He kept standing in the pocket, taking the shot, and finding his receiver. That's not a system quarterback. That's called toughness. In the mindset, man. There's a confidence to Shedeur Sanders that some people find refreshing and other people find arrogant. He doesn't shrink. He doesn't apologize for who he is. He walks into a room like he belongs there. And honestly, at this point, after everything he's been through, can you really blame him? His dad is Deshaun Sanders. You think Deshaun raised a kid who was going to hang his head every time somebody doubted him? But it's more than just the family swagger. People who've been around him in practice settings talk about his preparation, his film study, the way he dissects a defense before the snap. That's not given to you, that's built. And right now, in Cleveland, he's building. OTAs aren't padded practices. There's no live tackling, no full-speed collisions. But they tell you things. They tell you about decision-making, about footwork, about how a quarterback processes information when the play breaks down, about leadership, how he talks to his receivers, how he responds after an incompletion, whether guys want to play for him. Early returns from Cleveland's OTAs, coaches are noticing Shedeur Sanders. Now, let's be real. Deshaun Watson is still there, he's still getting reps, and head coach Tom Monken came out and called it a competition. Flat out said both guys would get opportunities to prove themselves throughout the process. But here's the detail that matters. First team reps. Shedeur Sanders is getting first team reps. In the NFL, first team reps are currency. They're respect. They're the coaching staff's way of saying, we see something here. We want to see more. For a rookie fifth-round pick, splitting reps with a veteran who cost this franchise a king's ransom, that's not nothing. That's actually a really big deal. Social media went sideways the moment that news dropped. Browns fans who had written off this season completely started paying attention again. Shedeur Sanders' highlight packages started getting reshared. His Colorado tape started trending. People who hadn't watched a single Colorado game last year were suddenly deep in the YouTube rabbit hole at midnight, watching him thread passes through traffic. And on the other side, the criticism crowd got louder too. OTA hype means nothing. Wait until he faces a real defense. Deshaun Watson is still the guy. Both sides are watching. Both sides are invested. That's what Shedeur Sanders does. He makes people care. Whether they're rooting for him or against him, nobody is indifferent. And honestly, in today's NFL media landscape, that kind of magnetism has value. If you're a Browns fan, and look, Browns fans have been through it, here's the question that keeps you up at night. What if he's actually the answer? What if this team, which has been one of the most tortured franchises in professional football for the better part of 3 decades, accidentally stumbled into their quarterback of the future by picking him in the 5th round after everyone else passed? That would be one of the greatest stories in NFL draft history, full stop. Monken has said the right things publicly. Competition is good, reps will be split fairly, the best man will win. But inside that building, people are watching this rookie, and what they're seeing, at least through the early weeks of the offseason program, is a young quarterback who looks like he was born to play this game. The ownership already admitted the Deshaun Watson trade was a mistake. They said it out loud, publicly. That's almost unheard of in the NFL. And when ownership says something like that, it sends a message to the entire building. The future matters more than protecting the past. Now, let's pump the brakes slightly, because this is where we separate the real story from the hype. OTAs are not the regular season. Shedeur Sanders still has an enormous amount to learn about playing quarterback at this level. The speed of the NFL game, the complexity of defensive schemes, the physical toll of 16 regular season games against professional athletes, none of that shows up in May practices. History also shows us that rushing a young quarterback before he's ready is one of the fastest ways to ruin him. We've seen it happen over and over again. The smart move, the patient move, is to let this competition breathe. Let training camp play out. Let the preseason games tell the real story, and then make the call based on what the football actually says, not what the narrative demands. If you enjoy watching real football stories unfold in real time, the kind that nobody can script, hit subscribe, because this Shedeur Sanders story in Cleveland is only getting started, and you don't want to be catching up later. Here's what this is really about, though. It's about a young man who was told in 100 different ways that he didn't belong at this level. By anonymous scouts, by draft boards, by a draft night that stretched into an eternity while he sat and waited and the whole country watched. He didn't fall apart. He didn't disappear. He showed up to Cleveland ready to compete. And right now, in a quarterback room that was supposed to be Deshaun Watson's, Shedeur Sanders is getting first-team reps. The doubters aren't gone. The questions aren't answered. But for the first time in a long time, Cleveland has something it hasn't had in years: a reason to believe.